Welcome, everyone, to our November 2nd meeting of the IMAG-MSM Working Group on Multiscale Modeling and Biopandemics. As always, I need to remind you that this meeting is live streamed and recorded and made available for viewing after the fact. So please be aware of that. As always, Tom Helikar and myself are available for suggestions and comments, as are Jim Sluka and Lorenzo. Lorenzo said he might be a little bit late today because of the different time zone issues today. We have a variety of communications media. It works better if you use them. We have a Twitter hashtag MSMViral. We have the GLIMPRINT.org website, which we'd love to have your help building. We have the IMAG MSM wiki page. Please do send us your successes, publications, grants, anything you'd like to see put up there and promoted. There is a LinkedIn page for the group. If you have job announcements, conference announcements, publications that you want to let people know about, those are all possibly things that we can put up on the LinkedIn page. There's the MSM YouTube channel with all the recordings as well. So please do help us get the word out about this so that our speakers have reasonable audiences for their presentations. We have that GLIMPRINT website. Again, we'd love to have help and support in developing that as we go forward. And the Twitter handle again is MSMViral. There are a couple of announcements. There is a multicellular staff scientist position in neurodevelopmental dynamics available at NICHD, which might be of interest to people in this group, especially their students and postdocs. That's anybody who is in this group would probably have people who are appropriate for that. There are a number of scientist positions in major company in Silver Springs, Maryland, also looking for people with the skill sets that we have here in this community. Reinhardt is looking to hire faculty in this area. I don't know whether you want to say any more about that opening, Reinhardt, since you're here.
Yeah, so these are faculty, tenure track faculty at all ranks. And there are more details at the webpage, and anybody can contact me, of course, with for more information.
There are a number of RFAs out there that are of interest to people. Some have very short-term deadlines, some longer. There are a number of Horizon grants which would have to be led, of course, by our European colleagues. Accelerating the implementation of new approach methodologies, deadline of January, maximizing the potential of synthetic data generation, which is the kind of thing that, of course, Gary talks about a lot, also due in January. Next generation of scientific instrumentation tools, methods, and advanced digital solutions for March. Innovative Health Initiative, also deadline in January. NSF has 23 616, Ecology and Evolution of Infectious Diseases. That's probably getting too late for this year, but something one might think about for next year. Smart Health and Biomedical Research in the context of artificial intelligence. That's really too soon for somebody to start this year, but might be of interest for next year. And we will have a steering committee meeting tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Still Eastern Daylight Time. So again, there'll be the time difference until next week for our European colleagues. We'd appreciate if people would join us. We're going to be trying to build a mission statement for GLIMPRINT to try to see what we can do to move forward. I think that mission will be very much informed by what we hear from Liesbet today. Are there any other announcements at the moment before we get on with the seminar? Coming up, November 16th, we have Pete Vandegraff from Certara. November 30th, we don't have anything scheduled. It's a little bit close to Thanksgiving. but it's possible to do that. So if people have a suggestion, we'd appreciate it. The 14th of November, December, we have Tong Li Jiang from University of Cincinnati speaking, and I would always appreciate your suggestions going forward. We certainly won't meet on the 28th of December. So potentially we have one slot on the November 30th between now and the end of the year unfilled, but we would love to have suggestions and ideas going forward. You've heard me say it before. Just because you spoke already doesn't mean you can't speak again. Suggest your students, your postdocs, yourself, people that you'd like to hear from, and we'll do our best to get them on the schedule. So I don't want to take any more time from Liesbet, who is going to be telling us about the incredibly exciting EDITH initiative, building an ecosystem for realizing the integrated virtual human digital twin.
I'm very happy to give an update on this coordination and support action that I think a bit more than a year ago. I also already mentioned it at some point when I presented maybe more of the VPH activities. A coordination and support action in the European Commission funding scheme is a smaller project with a shorter duration that is mostly aimed at bringing together people to design roadmaps and concepts to help the Commission determining priorities moving forward in funding schemes, but also in policies. And so this one is particularly focused on digital twins in healthcare, and it should be seen at in the context of a lot of activities and a lot of investments that the European Commission has already made, but of course also a lot of activities that have been going on worldwide. I'm listing here some of the roadmaps and some of the bigger initiatives that have played at the European level, and those are things coming from the in silico medicine side, but also coming from like Health EU, that is more wearables, sensing, data-driven twin side. The bottom right, those are HPC centers of excellence and for biomedical sciences and health. So all of these investments, they have led to really nice results, but in some cases, as it is with these large-scale projects in Europe, once the funding ends, if there is no follow-up project, which often there is not, then these tools remain active for a few more years. And if there then is no one group that really takes this on, then sometimes they become inactivated, which means that some of that investment is lost. Now, not all of it is lost, because what you see here are some mostly EU-based smaller startups and scale-ups and spin-offs that have that focus on in silico medicine services. Business to business, business to clinics, and also some larger companies that have decided to take on in silico services, in silico medicine services. What I'm not listing are, of course, the very big companies like Siemens, like Philips, like J&J, that also have a very strong component in silico medicine. Also, pharmaceutical companies like Sanofi or Roche. They should be on this list, but I chose to mention only the smaller ones. Now, if you look at all these things, then you can see some commonalities, and they are, for instance, that most of those services offered by the companies that you see here are focused on a single length scale and a single organ system. Also, that those that are really offering only in silico services, some are actually progressing nicely from startup to scale up. Others struggle a bit more to get themselves free from public money. So on the business modeling side, there's also still some challenges to be solved. So what does this coordination and support action wants to do? It wants to do 4 things, or it is tasked to do 4 things. One is to bring together the ecosystem. The other one is to build a roadmap, and I'll tell you in a minute what this roadmap should lead to. The third is to build a repository for resources being data, models, algorithms, anything that you would use, good practices in the development of digital twins. And then the last one is the simulation. Put forward the architecture for a possible simulation platform that would allow users from anywhere to use all of these things that they can find in the catalog and the repository, and to actually run simulations. Now, what is it that this, so the EDITH consortium that is working on this or is preparing things for then the community to give input on, is a combination of academic centers, research centers, HPC centers, hospitals, and then organizations that represent either policy or represent industry. So what we are supposed to do is put forward a vision for what is called the virtual human twin. This is the European Commission that wants to bring together all of its investments in digital and health. So all of its investments at the interface of digital and health in a internal flagship project, which they for now call the virtual human twin. We had in Europe also Destination Earth, which is a way where the Commission brought together all of their investments in health and Earth observation and climate change modeling to develop a digital twin of the Earth that can be used, for instance, for policymakers to assess the effect of their policies on actual the impact of their policies on climate change. So they wanted something like this for health as well, which is called the virtual human twin. So the definition that we were given for this virtual human twin is that it should be an integrated multi-scale time and discipline digital representation of the whole body that can capture its pathophysiology in all of its heterogeneity, and that is focused on providing patient-specific predictions in the whole chain of health and care, so from prevention to diagnosis to treatment and follow-up, but also working on the selection, personalization, de-risking of intervention options, so medical devices, drugs, etc. So this is a way in which some of the downsides that I mentioned with the translation to industry could be handled. So no more disappearing platforms or tools, no more or problems are not every company needing to establish their own or reinventing the wheel in terms of putting things together at different scales. This could be done in this public infrastructure, and then it could be used by everybody. Now, somehow the definition might seem to suggest that this could be working on a single integrated model. If you look at some of the questions that are being asked, clinical questions, you see that what you saw popping on the screen are a number of examples where models are not covering just a single length scale or just a single organ system, but they're actually making these bridges to answer specific questions. And the model of the heart that was just mentioned before we started the meeting is indeed an example where you have multiple length scales talking to one another to have a good representation of, for instance, electrical signals inside the heart. And this is actually what you would want when you have a model, or epistemologically, when you create a model, this is to answer a question. So not just to build some theoretical thing. And many questions that we have, tangible questions in clinics, can already be answered with models that only combine a few length scales or a few organ systems. So what is it that we want to do with the virtual human twin? Well, we want to, if we go a bit for a more pragmatic approach, we want to come up with a platform and an infrastructure that will allow connecting things if and when needed. And then ultimately, if you can connect 3 things, you can connect 4 things, you can connect 5, and then, you know, you can, if the question requires it, then you could go towards something that is approaching the integrated virtual human twin. So the more pragmatic definition that we've adopted inside the EDITH consortium is that the virtual human twin is to be a systematic, ever-growing digital quantitative representation of the actionable knowledge that we have on human pathophysiology, and that the public infrastructure related to the VHT will enable the pooling of resources and assets to develop those twins in the healthcare applications and assess their credibility. So this would mean that we are going for a federated public infrastructure, federated because there's already so much out there that we don't want to reinvent, but that we want to link up to. So a federated public infrastructure that with the collection of appropriate resources in a catalog and a repository. And as I said, these resources can be data, models, algorithms, but also access to the compute power and to the grid and the network there. And this should all be driven by the engagement of a collaborative ecosystem, meaning not just academia and industry, but also the healthcare sector itself and other stakeholders. Now, there are some discussions still, because I mentioned the virtual human twin as kind of the integrated concept, and digital twins as more tools for individual questions, maybe. But what is a digital twin? And I don't want to go into very big discussions. I'll just say how we have interpreted the term, which is in line with how the European Commission is using the term inside its own document. And that is a slightly more relaxed version of the definition that says that you have to have this real-time bidirectional interaction between the physical and the digital twin. So in our case, this is not how we see it. A digital twin is a personalized model that at some point during its life cycle is fed with patient-specific information. So that would lead us to the subject-specific digital twin, where we want our model to reach with a certain accuracy the behavior of the individual person that we are trying to build the model for. Now, in a lot of cases, when we're not talking about data-driven AI twins, for instance, we start first with a more generic digital twin, where we just want to, with our model, want to capture the behavior, a reasonable behavior that falls somewhere in the range of what we can experimentally or clinically observe. And then you can go to a population twin where you try to capture the average and the spread on a specific behavior in a population, and then you could go towards a more specific subject-specific one. So in order to not be too limiting for the VHT, we have decided to take all of these different twins into account and in the definition of the VHT. The applications of the VHT should be to allow decision makers to take well-informed decisions, but decision makers do not need to be only clinicians. That's an obvious one, of course, when they look at personalized therapeutic strategies for patients, but these could also be researchers that are working at the very start of the R&D cycle, making new therapeutic strategies, so drugs or devices. This could be healthcare authorities, this could be biomedical companies, using digital twins to build virtual cohorts to run and see the clinical trials or generate digital evidence that they want to take to the regulator. So all of those applications fall within the VHT. And then to put some boundaries, we feel that the VHT should focus, especially when it's collecting resources, it should focus on human data only. And in Europe, we have things like the European Health Data Space. We already have Elixir. Those are all initiatives that already collect and capture a lot of human data and human health data. So we are not going to import those. We're going to make the necessary connections with those. Now, if in some cases we cannot have access to relevant clinical data or even human data, of course, we need other sources. And in those cases, we can use surrogate data, either coming from in vitro experiments with human cells or even animal experiments. But then this data needs to be very clearly labeled as non-human in the latter case. The focus of the VHT is on translational purposes, but this doesn't mean that it needs to be only at the interface, only at the transition towards industry or towards the clinics. It needs to have a line of sight with human health, which means that basic biomedical research that doesn't aim to provide a treatment, that maybe is not the focus of the VHT. Of course, it can be used, but it can still be very early in the R&D process. And then a final one, it should be methodologically inclusive. I'm coming from the more mechanistic in silico medicine side, but more and more we notice that we are including AI and machine learning tools in the work that we're doing. And this is what it should be. So we have people in the consortium that are coming from the AI side. So it really, what model you use should depend on the knowledge that is available and on the data that is available. And then you pick the best technology to answer the question and nothing else. So we're not going to exclude any sort of methodology. So what do we think a VHT could look like? Since it is a decentralized infrastructure, you should be able to access it just locally. You have an interface, a single sign-on that will lead you to the catalog where you can see a whole bunch of resources. Some are in the repository of the VHT itself, others are located elsewhere, but you should be able to get access or find the ways to get access from within the VHT itself. So you can get access to all the digital twins that are developed, especially in Europe, because that should be the requirement from the European Commission. Anything funded with their money should, of course, be in the VHT, but this is not a European thing. It's open to everyone. So any digital twin that is inside, you can access. You can search in the catalog for, by data types, by the anatomical location, or any other attribute that you're interested in. You should be able to look for that. You should also be able to look or ask the system to provide you with the data sets that match the model that you have based on the meta information that has been given, so that you don't have to go look for it yourself, but that it's suggested which data sets are compatible with the model that you have, that you want to run. And then you should be able to run those models, so have access to the right compute infrastructure. And of course, this is not always free, so sometimes resources need to be applied for. And you should be able to orchestrate, connect a model of the heart with a model of the lung. And I'll come back on how this integration should work. And then finally, you should be able to, if you want to take this further towards regulatory approval, it's very unlikely that this whole platform in the near future will get regulatory approval. So you should be able to take out those elements that you've used to build your application, package them separately, and take that to your notified body or your regulator to get it approved for use in clinics. Now, this all sounds very high level and maybe a bit vague. We do realize that this is a lot of work, and lots of things are already ongoing. Lots of people have already infrastructures that aim to do something similar or part of this. So there is absolutely, the VHT doesn't need to start from scratch. We've listed here a number of things that we definitely feel we need to work on. Those are also explained in the roadmap. So on the technology side, at the individual resources, the integration thereof, the APIs, the infrastructure, and connecting with existing initiatives inside the European Union. And then there's also, beyond the technology, there is the ethical, legal, social issues, and not just access to privacy, ethics, and the legal part, but also regulatory considerations, for instance, and it's not listed on the slide, the social implications of everything that need to be studied. Then on the user side, we will have different types of users, not just academics, not just people from industry, but also clinicians. And I'll come back in a few slides on how we try to make sure there is a clear value proposition for each of the different types of user profiles. We could also envisage that with a different profile comes a different type of access. If I'm a PhD student or a researcher, I want to see everything that is inside the VHT catalog. Whereas if I'm more of a clinical orientation and I'm more of a user rather than a developer, then maybe I don't need to see all the very basic models that have a very low credibility assessment. Then I only want to see things that have more validation behind them. We need to think about workflows and the interaction with the other platforms and repositories. And then in order to sustain it, and that's very important because we've talked to a lot of stakeholders already that say that this is a good idea, that they can use this, but that they're not interested in it if this is going to be another short-lived investment from the European Commission. This needs to be sustained over a longer period of time. And that will allow then clinical uptake and the incorporation in the toolkit of large companies and startups. We should also allow to build marketplace services on top of the VHT infrastructure, and we're investigating different business models that can be used. And then the last line, that's European research infrastructure. So looking into how we can keep the public part of the VHD, how we can sustain that by also working, for instance, on interaction with the different member states in the Commission. And just to give a little bit of further detail, any word that was on the last slide means a whole wealth of research and additional questions. So for instance, the word integration that I mentioned can talk about the integration with models and data, how they find each other, but also integration of models at different time length scales, different organ systems that we need to talk to one another. And there it really depends on how tight the coupling needs to be. If you have something that can be loosely coupled, this can be arranged through orchestrated data streams. And otherwise, you have to take out both models, integrate them, and then put it back as a single, as a new single resource into the VHD. And then different types of data. Data can come from the typical clinical observations, imaging, omics, but also wearable data from the patient. We need to understand how we can upload that, store that into the system, and use it and combine it with other data sets. So on the orchestration side, there are multiple questions. We all know that some of the data cannot be moved, especially if it's clinical data, cannot be taken out of the hospital. So how can we then containerize the models and push them into the hospital? We need to talk to hospital IT organizations to have a better understanding of what is possible and what not, in which cases. And we need to also think about how all this real-world data that is being generated, how this can be incorporated. All right, so what will then be, we work on all of this, and this work, I have to say it again, this is the aim of the EDITH Coordination Support Action, is to list all the work that needs to be done, not do all the work. That is for a 10-year, we have to design in our roadmap the 10-year plan of different investments that need to take place so that we can actually go and reach this full vision of the virtual human twin. So where do we start? Well, we pre-selected a number of use cases when we wrote the grant in order to make sure that we did have tangible applications, tangible examples of different organ systems, different types of diseases, different types of modeling technologies, different types of data required, the different types of computational requirements, and opportunities to already start integrating different things. For instance, the model of the heart and the model of the brain that can talk to one another, and different types of ultimate application or use cases. So either it's personalized health forecasting or clinical decision support systems, so that we have a variety of things available. These have then served to identify a large number of questions and elements that we need to take into account when we are designing the federated repository. And here you see a very high level image of what this could be. If we start from the bottom right, this is the provider side. So what is it that providers need to have or provide in terms of data, taxonomies to use, what are the standards that they need to adhere to or that are required, that are recommended, the interoperability that they need to indicate. So all of this information that they need to provide in order for the resource to be added to the catalog and the repository. Then on the left-hand side, you have the representation towards the users. How can they find the right information? And on the top right, this is the administrative part where you have the different types of user profiles, where you have the curation, the validation, all the usual things. And then there is the link to the simulation platform. So this should then be directly coupled to the simulation platform, which makes it a bit of a challenge in the project because we do need to deliver the repository, but we don't need to deliver the simulation platform. But at the same time, if you want the repository to last beyond the duration of the project, you need to build it in such a way that you have already thought about a huge number of things that are actually belonging to the simulation platform. What you see here on the slide is a typical makeup with the front end and the middleware and the services, and then the compute backend behind it. We're now identifying what are really services that are required, what are front-end elements that are required, how to make the links to the compute infrastructure. And the European Commission is really being very serious about this, and they already indicated in the Digital Europe work program a procurement for this simulation platform of 20 million, for which more information is expected any day now. 20 million will, of course, not cover it, will be the start of it. And it's a bit of a challenge because we're still very much in the process of identifying all the things that should go in the platform. But, can't complain. We will have, there definitely is going to be something that is put together here. So how have we worked with other stakeholders, with the community, with the ecosystem? We have an industry advisory board that meets every other week, or sometimes with a bit more time in between, where one of the first things that we did was work on the value proposition. We have medical device companies, we have pharmaceutical companies, we have software companies, large one, big, small ones. We have American companies, we have European companies, we have a bunch of others, where we ask, what is it that you would want from the VHD? And then you get, of course, a wide range of things. But if I take a summary of this is what it in essence would be. That is using the resources that would be available in a platform, using it as a sandbox, using it as a benchmark for their own stuff, benefiting from the additional support that is going into the technology development, or that is going into development of clarity and certainty on ethical, legal, and social issues, especially liability, IPR. All of those aspects are very much top of mind in those discussions. And then facilitate, as this is a way to find other resources, to find other partners. So it should they see it as a way that could facilitate linking their own developments to other partners, but also to other commercial opportunities. When we have similar conversations with clinicians, there are different scenarios that emerge there, depending on what is kind of the profile of the clinician. If we're talking about a clinician in training, this could be really very much like using it to train on virtual patients or test hypotheses. When it's a clinician researcher, it's more to get input on as clinical decision support system or investigate comorbidities. Whereas if we're talking about clinician practitioner, which originally we didn't really foresee, but which we are asked, or where there is a lot of interest in anyway. The question is there, how does it work with the regulatory approval? So then we come to the situation that I mentioned earlier, where probably we'll go first for these kind of spin outs of specific applications that then can go into regulatory approval and be taken up by practitioners. And there are a number of examples. For instance, in Leuven, the development of the patient registry or the patient electronic files explicitly allows for inclusion of additional tools. So there is a very short distance between the system that is used and the possibility and the people developing models. AR/VR is being discussed as one of the technologies that can help to bridge the gap between the developments and the clinician practitioners or the patients. Now, if we want to take this to sustainability, and I'm going towards the end of this presentation, so we start from the early prototype demonstrator, simply because then we have something to show to people that are less technical, including policymakers, so that they can see what are different things that could come from the simulation platform. We're working on sustainability. I already explained this. And we also are working on policy recommendations, especially in light of a lot of regulations that are being passed in the European Commission or in the European Union on, there's the Data Act, there is the AI Act, there is we already have the GDPR, but there is also the European health data system that is being put in place. So all of these, we need to make sure that they do not inhibit reaching the goal of the VHD, or else we need to make recommendations. But policy recommendations also, of course, includes what should be priorities for funding going forward, and how can we reach and trying to find a balance between early successes of the low-hanging fruit, but then also a sustained investment to be able to reach the full version of the VHT. And this has to be done in collaboration, not just with the European Commission, but unfortunately, as is the reality in Europe, with different member states. So we are putting together a strategy for the EU 27 on how to get in touch with the local member states and get them to play ball and co-invest in this initiative. And then ultimately, one of the first things that I mentioned, or in the pragmatic definition, the last bit of it said, with a collaborative ecosystem, that means that the ecosystem needs to collaborate. And for that, there needs to be incentive mechanisms, because nobody is going to just for the fun of it, invest some time in trying to get all this meta information, all this commenting done, to include resources inside the repository and inside the catalog if there's no return on investment. So this is also something that we're working on. And then this comes to the last couple of slides, where if the question would be, how can I contribute to this? Then we would say, we'd love to hear your thoughts. We drafted a first version already of the roadmap. It had to be delivered to the European Commission 10 months after the start of the project, so it was a bit of an expedited exercise, but this was required because they already had a number of projects in the pipeline that they wanted to maximize the input from the work that was already being done. So this draft roadmap is currently around 100 pages. You can find it here through the QR code or the link that was also put in the communication that was sent around. And what it does is it doesn't provide a solution yet. It mostly links, it discusses what are the different elements, where are we, what are the options, what are the things that we need to think about when we are building something like this. And then the things are from a technology perspective, but also from an LC perspective, from a user perspective. Those can be found back in the different chapters of the roadmap. And it starts with a clickable map, so that if you're not interested in some of these parts, you can just skip them and immediately go to the thing that you're interested in. As a 100-page document is a bit hard to digest for policymakers, there's also a manifesto that was created. It's 2 pages. Stating very clearly and succinctly what it is that the VHT aims to do and what could come out of it. And then this is used as a way to show the support of the ecosystem. So we have already close now to 70 signatories, and that means companies like Siemens and Edwards and Sanofi that said, yes, we support this. But also a lot of the smaller in silico medicine companies. We have like universities, university hospitals, research centers, HPC centers, and other organizations that are representing, for instance, clinicians, or that are representing other types of researchers or industry. And what this does is this gives a clear sign to the European Commission that this is something that is of interest to the community. It also helps people within the Commission to make it very clear towards their colleagues that there is a support for this initiative and that it should be sustained. So this is not yet public. There is going to be a high-level launch event where they will launch officially the virtual human twin. And then we will launch a website where additional people can sign in. If you think your organization or your institution would want to sign something like this, and it is something that is international, despite the fact that there's a few times the word European that appears. There is not going to be an exclusion of non-Europeans, of course. Then please get in touch, and we're happy to send you the instructions and the manifesto. And then finally, we've been working a lot on drafting the manifesto, drafting the roadmap, working within the consortium, then consulting with experts on specific advisory boards, and then also a few public meetings online and a public feedback round for the roadmap, to which also people from this community contributed with comments. That was very much appreciated. But now, moving forward, this should be really fully public. So there are 2 meetings planned in Paris and in Amsterdam in January and July next year, where everybody is invited. We cannot reimburse everyone, unfortunately, but we rather would have more people there and just open it up than be able to reimburse everyone. So please do get in touch if you're interested. As soon as the last signature on the contract is there for Paris, there will be a save the date that will be sent out, and then gradually more information on the program will be released when we have it. There's also, and that's the last thing, I call for inclusion of new resources and use cases. If you have a data set, if you have a model that you would want to see included, if you maybe have a use case that you feel could complement the use cases that we have, please go to the EDITH website. There is on the most right tab, there is this call for use cases that you can find, and you can let us know what it is that you have that you would like to contribute, and we will get in touch with you immediately. And the whole idea is with this initiative is, other than the large-scale human destination Earth, we in healthcare, we have lots and lots already of different initiatives, different models, different platforms, different things that we don't want to all lump together in one big fleet. But what we do want to do is try and rise the tide, because that will lift all of the boats that we have, and we'll probably need all of the boats and then some to answer the questions that we have in healthcare. So with that, I'm happy to answer any of your questions or take any suggestions.
I'm going to take the advantage of me being able to unmute myself. But I just wanted to say thank you for a great presentation. This is a massive undertaking. And I wish the US actually was just as forward thinking as the European Union in funding, similarly massive and potentially impactful effort that you guys are undertaking. So no question here, just a comment.
Thanks, Tomas. I think there is the Spark project that is led by Peter Hunter that goes a bit in this direction, together with the 12 Labours project that they have in Auckland. So there are definitely things that we can learn from one another.
Well, so one question that might be an obvious one is, how could we, the community that we're representing in our group here, be maximally engaged and supportive of what you're trying to do in Europe?
I think one thing for sure is if there's time to go through the roadmap, and from your perspective, make sure that the things that you need, if you would want to use something like this, are present. There are, as always, people come from their particular background, have their own biases, and we try to we've tried to build a consortium so that we have good representation of everything. But it's always easier for some people that are more prolific in writing take the upper hand. So I feel that we need some additional input in the more sensing aspects, the wearables, and I know that there have been some discussions here. And also make sure that the applications that we're going for, that those are sufficiently broad, that you see yourself represented essentially when you read the roadmap.
So I have a question. This is massive, Liesbet. If you can pull off even some small part of that, it'll be incredible. When I listen to this, to me it seems, what I'd like to understand is, what do you think of the central resource? Is it a generic model of human biology, or is it a model that's calibrated for particular applications, that's validated, say, using animal models? Are there tools that allow you to take a generic patient model and use it in a forecasting capability? Who will generate all these tools and data sets?
Thanks, Reinhard. And just to make sure, we are just writing the roadmap. Somebody else, or there could be funding for other people to do this. How do we see this? Multiple different options, I would say, depending on the technology that you use, as explained with the generic to the subject specific. There might be, for some applications where you indeed start with the generic, and then depending on the clinical data that you have, for some cases, this might be patient-specific geometries, might be the best and the only type of data that you can use to personalize it. And then, automatic segmentations and all of those algorithms that can help extract the patient-specific geometries from medical images would be the tools, the algorithms that you can link up to the data set, and then with the generic model to generate a more patient-specific model. But there can also be other ways where you use data-driven twins, where you start from wearables. There are algorithms that have been developed in order to extract data from wearables and generate personalized representation. So I really don't see this as one way to get to a personalized model. There's not going to be one backbone model that is always going to be used in all applications. So it's really going to be more of a platform with different tools inside that people have developed for a specific application, but that might, in many cases, also have added value for other people's applications. So if we find the right language to use, the right taxonomy to use to describe those tools and those resources, then they can be much more broadly used than what they were developed for. That's how we see it for the moment. And then ultimately, if we have specific things that come back over and over, there could be dedicated workflows that will capture all or a part of it that can also be shared. And then this can then facilitate the routine reuse of something for people who just want to use it rather than want to develop it. So really all of the different things that anybody could develop in the course when they're making the model can be of use to other people in the community and should be shared.
Great, thank you.
Surcoat and then Mitchell, I think, next.
Great, thank you, James. Hi, Liesbet. That was a great presentation. And hi, everyone else. I hope you're all doing well. I haven't had the honor to meet you yet, Liesbet, but it was very informative. And my goodness, sounds like a huge job what you guys are doing there. No doubt it's going to be successful, something we need. So I have a question. Well, just a little bit tell you where I come from. So my background is in AI, and with a lot of work in the last 20 years in the health and clinic sector. But I am actually, since a couple of years, highly involved in standards. So I am also the co-convener for the European Standardization Organization in Health Informatics, besides being part of many standards at ISO. So there is actually, because your platform is such a huge one and it tries to connect many countless entities, partners, clinics, individuals, institutions. So it sounds like a perfect place or application or use for standards. So I just came up to think of one standard that we develop currently at ISO. And by the way, the leader of that standard is from US. So you are already involved if you apply that one. So it is called a personalized health navigation standard. So it is still under development. We work on it. And currently, actually, we are investigating large language models for that standard. But with that standard, we try to cover, I send you probably a little bit of the description of it by mail, potentially. So we try to cover a general architecture to support real-time monitoring and status determination, including identification of emerging health navigation challenges, as well as existing health conditions, including chronic, acute, episodic. And that is, so the actual architecture is quite massive. And I just came to think of your platform could actually make very good use of it because it also has defines use cases for such a big platform. So I wonder what kind of standards are you already looking into, because we also develop actually about 20 different standards currently at ISO for artificial intelligence in the clinic.
Yeah, and you make me realize, thank you for this question and the comments. I would love to receive that information that you mentioned. I put my email address there in case you didn't find it elsewhere. We have people at HITS in Heidelberg, that's Martin Golubiewski and colleagues, working on the standards bit. He's also a leader of one of the ISO technical committees. And I've put in a link to the Fair Sharing collection, which shows the entire overview of all the standards and the community standards that are there that are being used and that we are considering for the VHT. So there is that aspect that I didn't mention. Going towards a further standardization it's a tricky discussion, because we want people to use the platform, which means that we cannot make the threshold too high, because otherwise nobody will do this. It's too much work. But at the same time, we do need something of a metadata to be able to connect all these different things. What we are hoping for is that, by starting now, by having a minimal set of meta information that is also inspired by the work that is being done in the different standardization bodies, that we can gradually instruct people and teach them about these things, that we can increase the incentives to use those what is already out there, and that we can evolve to situations where these available standards are more and more taken up also by the basic research community. That's kind of the hope at this point.
Yeah. So actually, we had an annual management meeting in June this year in Brussels, and I actually brought up, by the way, this is also related to what we discussed, Reinhard and James, in Paris. I brought up this potential standardization of digital twins. And actually, after some analysis and discussion, we thought it might be too early for a standard. Actually, you're very right, Liesbet, there, because we need to start using it before we can actually see what is it we standardize. But the technical report we thought could be a good one to start with. It's just for information, probably.
Yeah, great.
Thank you.
Great, awesome.
I had a we were discussing this before. It seems like the digital twin, as applies to humans, would be easier to, or a good starting point would be dentistry. Have you involved that community as well?
I myself personally, I work with dentists in determining the personalized bone augmentation scaffolds and things like that. We don't have a dentistry use case. When we talk to clinicians, we also include them, yes.
Yeah.
But there's not a particular application yet.
I think maybe there needs to be like an outreach and education to them, but because a few that do use it, it's massively useful, and it's, from a computational point of view, it's somewhat easier than soft tissue and organ modeling.
Yeah, it's the same. We have a bone, a femur fracture risk predictor in there for the same reason, because computationally it is easier. On a slightly related note to this, we are launching later this week a clinical survey that we had already had the first version of this clinical survey 2 years ago to try and understand what is known within the clinical community about in silico and the use of computational modeling and simulation. We published that paper in Frontiers, and now we have a second version of the survey that is going out and we are really trying to reach a lot more clinicians. We have translated it in 5 or 6 different languages this time. And definitely last time I already had my my dentistry colleagues in there. So we will definitely send out the questionnaire to you guys as well, if that is okay, and hope that you can share this with your colleagues. I noticed that by sending the questionnaire to them, that they got intrigued and they came back and wanted to have a conversation about it. So it's a good way also to bring this to their attention.
Thank you.
Mitchell, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So this was a fantastic talk. I think this is the 3rd or 4th time I've heard this, and every time I feel like it's even more motivational and exciting. So thank you again. One of the questions I had, this actually came up in the spring in the Lorenz Center, which we had a couple EDITH partners come out there. One of the big questions we sort of had during that meeting was, in geophysics and climate science and meteorology, there's sort of this existing integration with statisticians and uncertainty quantification in that model framework and model building. So I wanted to ask, what do you vision with the EDITH project? Do you think it's the priority is getting the models developed and available and then integrating the uncertainty quantification and the statistician viewpoint, or are you hoping to sort of get that all together all in one shot here?
No, I see this as different things. So for some people, it will be about getting the model in there and just looking at what other people do. But definitely part of the mission of the VHD is to help people transition and mature their digital twins, which then includes uncertainty quantification. So that means that tools like VECMA and other tools that have been developed for uncertainty quantification should definitely be in the toolbox. And we should facilitate people's use of those tools that are there, and educate them on what it is that is required when you want to take a model forward. These are different steps. Linked to this, we also have part of the information that we want from people is an assessment of the credibility. Now, it's very hard to do that, to ask that from people themselves. There is a credibility access. So ideally, when people put something in the repository, credibility is 0 if it's a 0 to 1 axis. And then based on the different evidence that you provide, has it been reviewed? Has it been, have you done these tools? Have you done this? And the results from that, there should be, the system should upgrade your credibility gradually towards a higher value. And uncertainty quantification is definitely one of those things that belongs there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So I have a question regarding, I'd be interested in understanding more about the feedback that you have obtained thus far, feedback and concerns from clinicians. Do you feel like you have a buy-in? Do you feel like, where do you stand with that, and what do you think the opportunities might be, in the near future for you?
Yeah, we talk to a lot of clinicians. Of course, it's a bit like survivor bias. The ones that you don't get to talk to are the ones that you actually want to hear, because the ones that do talk to you are the ones that at some level are already convinced that they want to use some tools. And then it varies depending on who you talk to and how proficient they are themselves, what they want to do. The best image, one of the questions that I always ask is, how do you see this being taken up? Do you think that clinicians or hospitals should have a department of computer modeling and simulation, or should this be in every service? How do you see that? And then one of the colleagues, one of the clinicians said, you could consider this to be something like imaging has been in the past. In the beginning of imaging, there was so much investment, it was so technical that people didn't want to do that themselves. So there was a radiology department where everything was centralized. But now, as people get more and more used to seeing these images, some things don't need to be done by radiologists. And you see that, for instance, things like ultrasound, you find ultrasound machines in all of the different clinical departments, and they do that themselves. So with computer modeling and simulation or with digital twins, it could be something like that, that there is a centralized department for the more technical elements, and then for the smaller tools that can be done or handled by local departments or by individual departments, those could be trickling down. And that might be a model that we can go for to introduce this and to make people aware. It will be a sort of evangelizing exercise, right? We need to show what it can do, and we need to make it such that it's not going to people who don't want to use digital tools, fine, they're not going to be replaced by the digital tools, but they're going to maybe be overshadowed by those who do use the digital tools. So it's
yeah, I think it's important to really highlight that it will be a tool that's going to assist them in providing better care and personalized care.
Yeah.
And some of the clinicians that we've been talking with, and this is in particular in the area of the immune system, and so, you know, sepsis, for example, they know that their tools for diagnosis and treatment are crude, you know, CBC, you know, that metabolic panel, that sort of thing, and then everybody's treated with antibiotics immediately. Yet they are concerned about adapting anything new that's not necessarily, you know, true and proven. And so I feel like I wonder if in many situations it'll have to be an FDA approved device or technology before it can really garner the interest by the clinical community to the extent that we hope to.
Yes, and then some, because the FDA approved part is it could be a starting point. We saw from the report that you can read in the Frontiers paper, trust is very important, but trust isn't necessarily equated to regulatory approval. Mm-hmm. As it would be with clinicians, you know, trust also comes from when it works in their hands, and then whether it's approved or not, well, that is a bonus. But when it works in their hands, then that is then it works, and then they're convinced. So there are multiple layers in that convincing process. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay, any other questions? I think we've had a great discussion.